going to chat about today?
Hi, I thought we could discuss preschool homeschooling. And what happened this week to me was on one of the Facebook groups about starting homeschooling, a mom was saying how she's just starting homeschooling. She's going with such and such a curriculum provider, and her son is 4 years old. And how do you teach him to read? So maybe you want to jump in and say how you would respond, and I'll chip in and say how I responded.
Well, so let's have a open, honest moment. I thought when we decided to homeschool our eldest child at the age of 2, that that's what it was about. It was about learning to read, write, and do maths. And it was pretty soon into her 5th year when we decided we were now formally going to start something, that I realized that's not what it's about. And it doesn't have to come from a curriculum or from a well laid out plan. There are very natural ways to teach our children to read, but doing it so early is not actually advisable. And I think that you've got a fabulous quote by Raymond Moore that you should probably use as a spin-off so that we can lay a foundation for what we're saying so people don't think we're off our rocker.
Yeah, you know me well, and I actually do have my quotes ready. I love to collect quotes because often they say things so much better than I can say them myself.
Yeah.
So Raymond Moore is considered the grandfather of the homeschooling movement in the States, and he and his wife Dorothy did a lot of research. And in their book, The Successful Homeschool Family Handbook, is one of my favorite quotes that applies to preschool, where he said, "The idea that parents should hurry reading, spelling, writing, or math ahead of children's normal development is not supported by a single replicable research study in the world or by any clinical experience in history. All history, research, and common sense points in the opposite direction. We repeat, any who push the 3 R's early deny the readiness the Creator built in: reasonably mature vision, hearing, taste, touch, smell, reason, brain growth, coordination, as clearly documented in our books." And I've read many other similar quotes. And so what they're actually saying is that while there are some children that do start reading at age 4, on average, most children are not really ready for formal lessons at such a young age. And we actually cause more harm and stress ourselves out and even burn them out when we push them too hard. So unless you've got a child who's really nagging you to read and starting to sound out their phonics themselves, there's no pressure on you as a mom to feel that you must get your child to read. And, it's not a race. It's not he who reads first wins, You've got many years ahead to let your child learn to read. And I think it's better to let them first learn to love books, because then they're going to want to read. So I recommend that moms of preschoolers must read aloud as much as they can every day, if possible, at breakfast time, in the morning, or make it a bedtime story, or breakfast time and lunchtime and bedtime, whatever suits you, and let children learn to love books. And then just create a stimulating environment with other things that they can do that naturally children do to develop.
Correct. I agree with you completely. And I think that the books that Raymond Moore refers to over there is one entitled Better Late Than Early, and obviously they've got other ones. And that was the book that I read along with Ruth Beechick's 3 R's that stated, just don't rush this process. If you provide a learning rich environment for your preschoolers and for your children, they will naturally gravitate towards the world of literature. And that doesn't mean that we don't create lovely learning centers. The idea and the concept of a learning center in our home came from another, grandma and granddad couple of the homeschooling movement, Clay and Sally Clarkson, in their book, The Wholehearted Child. And they spoke about looking at each room in your home and seeing that as part of your children's natural learning environment. But there's certain things that you want to do. So for preschoolers, you do want to have imaginary play spaces. So dress-up boxes with cowboy and Indian clothes and princess clothes and fairy clothes and, you know, mommy's old beads and all those sorts of things, and high heel shoes that they're going to flop, flop, flop through the house in. You know, that's a lovely sort of center. Another one is to have like an art crafty center, Play-Doh and, you know, watercolor palette, paper, pencils, crayons, you know, all that sort of stuff. I had that in our kitchen because it was just, you know, high propensity for mess, so it needed to stay in that place. Another one that we had was a music corner. So we had little musical instruments that they could tinker on and play. Sometimes we actually made our own rice bottles, you know, that you could shake and whatever. But we had music tapes and earphones. It was back in the day of an actual cassette tape, you know, and I think we called them a Walkman. And the kids used to love that. And then obviously your lounge, your big book baskets, and even audiobooks that they can put on and listen to themselves if you're not available for one another reason. And then in their rooms, I also like to have an imaginary play space so that they could play with a doll's house or with horses or, you know, little pet shop characters, whatever. And we kind of discount that as not learning. But their business of learning, their school, is play.
Yes, play is the work of childhood. That's another famous saying that really just conveys that message so nicely.
Yeah.
I remember you also saying to moms, you know, if you can, rather than buying an expensive school curriculum, invest in a jungle gym, or for another family it might be a trampoline or just a little scooter bike, you know, things that get your children outside, developing their muscles, being in the fresh air. The research actually shows that children need to develop their gross motor skills so that later when they're doing fine motor work, those muscles that support the fine motor skills are actually well developed, and then they have less learning problems. But very often parents only think of education as doing the fine motor skills, you know, the writing and the drawing and the arts and the crafts and the close-up work. But they don't think about climbing trees and swinging on swings and hanging upside down on jungle gyms as educational, and yet it's vital for brain development.
Absolutely. And then the other lovely quote, now that you're mentioning outdoors, and I think that anybody who's known me for a while has heard me say this again and again, it's from Charlotte Mason. And she says, in this time of extraordinary pressure, educational and social, perhaps a mother's first duty to her children is to secure for them a quiet, growing time, a full 6 years of passive, receptive life, the waking part of it, for the most part, spent out in the fresh air. And I think that is one of the most valuable things for us. Let's consider also that this quote was written almost 150, 200 years ago. And she's saying in that time of extraordinary pressure, how much more so now are our children facing pressure from every single side, and the mum as well. You know, if we make the choice to homeschool and all our friends are choosing to send their kids to school, there's immediately an internal pressure that comes in. I need to keep up with my friends and their kids. But if we can step out of that comparison space and give our children in this time these full 6 to 7 years doing the stuff that you've just spoken about, building all of those muscles, and what she says, the passive receptive life, that because there's no stress, so you can receive. I mean, we all know, even as parents, what it's like when we're in a state of stress. It's very hard to receive information. Give that to our children. That is such a gift. Whether it's a jungle gym, whether it's a nature walk every single day, you know, take them into a green space and find other like-minded families so that you can go out and poke around with a stick in the sand and look at a river as it changes through the seasons. Yeah.
I think, that receptive also just makes me think of, you know, that thing that children are actually little sponges. They're never not learning. We hardly have to even teach them. They'll learn. You know, if you're not teaching your child to read, you'll be going somewhere and they'll ask you what that stop sign is.
Yes.
And there they start learning that these signs convey a sound that becomes words. And at some point, they eventually become curious. And there are some instances of children only learning to read at about age 8 or 9. But suddenly, because they weren't under pressure, they wanted to, they were motivated, and they learned easily. So if you're trying to teach a 4-year-old or a 5-year-old or even a 6 or 7-year-old, and it's heavy going and they're struggling and they've got a bad attitude and they're reluctant, my advice is always just to ease up and wait until they're ready and wait until they're motivated. And definitely with preschoolers, there is no pressure. They've only got this window to be a little child who's not at school or being formally schooled. Let them play and just enjoy that time.
You've also got another little quote, and perhaps we can just let parents know that it's not that we are anti-curriculum. We are all for the right program in the right season. One of the things that you often say is children don't need a curriculum, a mum does. So if a mum is really struggling, or even if there is a dad that is saying, geez, I don't think that you can do this on your own, you need to have some sort of structure. What easy, lovely things can we offer to parents, to the mom who needs the curriculum?
Well, obviously, two options come to mind, and some parents like to combine both. So the first one I would suggest is ABC Fun, which I authored when I had a 2-year-old, and I'd been homeschooling for a couple of years, and tried to combine all the wonderful ideas that I'd learned from different people and different resources so that I would actually do it with this preschooler that I was going to be raising up. And so ABC Fun is aimed at children between 3 and 6 years old. And it's not teaching them to read, it's teaching them that learning the alphabet is fun, and that there is an alphabet and we have letters, and it involves reading and some crafts. And it's a no mess, no fuss curriculum, because when I used it, I had a bunch of little toddlers and I couldn't handle complicated craft activities that required a mess and a fuss when I had babies and toddlers. So it's really user-friendly for moms who don't want stress. And then our Little Footprints program that you and I co-authored is aimed at children between 4 to 8 years old. And it's different in that it's not focusing on the alphabet. Instead, it's literature-based, and it's a study of South Africa by reading children's picture books. And so they're going to learn about our different people groups, our animals and plants, our cities and different places in the country, nature conservation, and all kinds of lovely stuff through reading stories. And it includes activities that are suitable for preschoolers, that are also easy for a mother to do. Everything you need, you can pick up in the supermarket the next time you go shopping, because I know if you've got to go somewhere specific to get it at a hardware store or an art store, you're just not going to do it. So we made it really easy for moms who've got a bunch of little kids, or 1 or 2, and you can just fit it into your day.
Correct. And I think as we close, the last thing I would say is that we have everything within us as parents. Marty Duplessis from Dynamis, she always says that the parents are the child's curriculum. You know, we didn't need anybody to tell us how to help our child to walk and how to help them learn to talk by giving them the vocabulary. We need to get back to that place where we trust ourselves with our children and don't always think that it's, you know, it's the educational specialists that know. And look at your day that you have as a mum and figure out, how can I draw my child into my world? And as you go through your day, talk about everything. When you are washing dishes, get a little stool and let the children stand next to you and wash. And sure, you might have to clean up a bit of a mess on the floor afterwards, but that's also something that we do together. When you're cooking, give them stuff to chop or to stir. Obviously always watching out for safety, and just draw them into your world and talk and read and enjoy being together. It goes so fast. We're both parents of young adults now and all starting to find their wings and fly. Just savor every single moment with those little guys. It's a precious time of life. Well,
I think that wraps it up. See you next time.
See you next time, Shirley.